Hello and welcome to COVID Conversations here on WNCU 90.7 FM, streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm your host, Kimberley Cartwright. I'm the News and Public Affairs Director here at WNCU 90.7 FM. And as always, we're using the Zoom platform to talk about how COVID-19 is affecting our world. Lolethia D.L. Underdue is a lecturer in the Department of Mass Communications at North Carolina Central University. She's also the general manager of the student radio station AudioNet here at North Carolina Central. And she's also an announcer here at WNCU FM. Definitely, she wears a lot of hats. And today we're going to talk to her about her experience as an on-air personality and how she's working her way through COVID-19. Hello, DL, and thank you so much for being a part of the show today.
Good morning, Kimberly. Thank you for having me. I've been anxiously awaiting my turn to be on COVID Conversations. I finally made it.
Yes, and I'm glad that you said yes. I know that you're really very busy, and I just appreciate your time here. Okay, let's get started. In this era of the internet, so much information and so much entertainment is being generated through it. What role does radio play as an information disseminator in this bold new world of the way we communicate?
Well, radio absolutely is, something that everyone still uses. You'll talk to people and they'll say, I don't listen to radio, but the numbers do not lie. Back in 2019, I read an article that was published and it said that radio reaches 92% of people in the US every week. So everybody is still using radio. I know 2019, that seems so long ago now, that's probably 3 or 4 years, but let's say it dropped. Let's say it's only reaching 85% of people in the US. That's still a huge amount of people every week that's reached by radio. And the news and information that we provide, the entertainment, whatever your flavor is, whether you want to hear hard news, whether you're looking for sports talk, whether you're looking for entertainment, musical, country, whatever it is that your interest is, radio provides for its listeners. And so it's something that is very, very easy to access for most people. And it's a part of most people's lives almost every day, especially on their morning commutes.
So what about with the proliferation of cell phones as like our primary communication device? What role does terrestrial radio play in all of that?
So Kimberly, as you know, and we've known each other, audience, for a really long time. Like when I was a student, I met Kimberly for the first time. So I'm sure you remember back in the 90s when satellite radio was just taking off, and they told us that all of us were going to be unemployed and that there would be no jobs for us because satellite radio was going to come and just take all of our listeners. And that's not what happened at all. When television came about, people thought that would be the death of radio, but it's still here. So radio is something that's really vibrant and has a lot of listeners. Will we have less because of the telephones and the access that people have through their streaming devices and cell phones? Absolutely. But it's still something that is accessed by most listeners. In fact, like WNCU has its own app. So if you so desire, you can download our mobile app. You can listen to it on your smart device. A quick plug here, WNCU in the App Store or the Google Play Store. Download the app and you can stream us wherever you go. So you don't have to miss COVID Conversations or any of the programs that we offer here at WNCU. So we're just as nimble as some of the other platforms. People think about Spotify for podcasting. They may think about Apple Music, but WNCU and other stations also have a presence in these platforms. And so you can absolutely still access radio. We don't plan to go anywhere. We plan to continue to stay nimble and connected to our listeners in whatever way that we can.
So will you talk about radio and its use in natural disasters?
Oh, absolutely. So, and that's something that people kind of take for granted. You hear the EAS test, on the radio and you're like, what is that? Why is that playing? And then you hear information about natural disasters or Amber Alerts or whatever. So originally the system was designed so that if the president needed to talk to the people in the country, and this is probably even before television, I'm not sure, so I'd have to double check my notes on that. But originally the system was designed, it was the EBS system, the emergency broadcast system, and now it's emergency alert system. But it was designed so the president could reach everybody in the country within about 10 minutes using this alert system. But we also use it for local events. So like things like thunderstorms or tornadoes or hurricanes. So all of that information is there. Cell phones have picked up on that. So I'm sure most of you notice now that when a storm is coming, you probably get an alert on your cell phone. But if you're like me, you've turned off a lot of those alerts. And so radio and television definitely would be my lifeline in an emergency situation, because I hate getting those alerts on my phone.
So I want you to talk about now, like the difference between, say, the internet and radio, and radio's hope for survival. I know that in order to get information through the internet, you have to have an internet connection, and that's not free.
Absolutely not. So internet means it's a service that you have to pay for. You're paying a provider somewhere for that service, or maybe you have some kind of voucher that allows you to access it at a discounted price or for free. But for most people, internet does cost money, and that can be prohibitive because high-speed internet is not cheap at all. With all these new companies coming into our area, none of them are offering internet for $20 a month. That's not happening. So internet is expensive, and radio, on the other hand, is absolutely free. As long as you have a radio, you can tune in and pick up our station for $0, and you can hear all of the entertainment and the programming. So if you're absolutely, without the means to access the internet, you can still, if you have a radio, and pick up WNCU or any of the other what we call terrestrial stations, which means just local stations. So those are available to people. Cell phones, I think some of them, you have more range in that you're able to, pick up stations in other places with your cell phones, whereas with radio, you are kind of limited to what you can pick up in your broadcast area. So there's a little bit of difference in between those two. I really love radio in that, like, it's local. And that is something that you don't always get with some of the other listening platforms that people have.
Yeah, and I think another thing that would help with radio survival is that every car made in the last 50 years has an AM or FM receiver.
Every car has an AM or FM receiver. And even with satellite radio, it's still available that you can pick up the local stations with your satellite radio. So it's absolutely accessible. There is no excuse for you not to listen to your local radio station unless you just don't want to, but otherwise, I mean, in terms of accessibility, there is usually a way that you can access the station. And I mean, in an emergency, like a weather alert, where cell phones might be down, you can still pick up your local radio stations and find out information about, where maybe the Red Cross is coming to hand out supplies, or where the area in your local vicinity that's most impacted by the storm. Like, that information would be something you could access on radio.
So tell me, here in COVID, it's just been so devastating to all of us. What's been the most difficult thing about being an on-air announcer during COVID-19?
I think initially it was really hard because you were by yourself. I mean, people were still calling you at the station. And a lot of times, I'm at the station alone, but COVID-19 was different because as you know, working at the station is vibrant. There are people walking in and out, around, doorbells ringing, all of those things, that interaction that you get that maybe our listeners don't get behind the scenes, but all of that kind of dried up, and it was just very lonesome for months and months at the station with during COVID-19. So that's been really hard. And just like the things that we enjoyed, like when we used to have our listener appreciation parties and that sort of thing, and we stopped doing that during the bigger part of the pandemic. And so we didn't get to see our listeners and interact with them. And so that, I mean, and that makes a difference for me anyway. I do like meeting the people that make all of this possible, because it's important to connect with people, real live breathing people.
Yeah, it was exciting to get to come back to the radio station, and I did miss that connection as well. And then from the COVID onset, this show was born, COVID Conversations, and it
Yeah,
was born in my living room in my house because we were all working from home. So that was kind of different, and really I do appreciate being back at work with my colleagues.
absolutely. And I remember the first episode, I was like, what is this? And I thought it was like a one-time thing. And then I'm like, oh no, we're doing this every week. This is kind of cool. Just learning about how other people have been impacted by this, and not, I mean, because a lot of times the way we think about COVID, we think about it in a very personal way, like how it's impacted me personally. And we forget that other people have a whole different set of challenges with COVID-19. So the program has been really interesting for me, just learning what other people are having to deal with, or like when you interview some of the people from the research facilities, like the things that they're doing to try and do outreach and pull in more people. All of that is important, and we need to know about it. So the show has definitely, in my mind, filled a space that is very important for our listeners.
Thank you. So WNCU has done a number of public service campaigns about COVID-19, and you have been on the listener side of it to make sure
Mhm.
that it is disseminated to our public through your shows. So how effective do you feel they've been in keeping the public informed in emergency?
Oh, absolutely effective, especially in the beginning, because it was so new. It was a novel virus, right? And so we, had to constantly be reminded about all the things we should avoid doing, like touching our face, reminding people to wash their hands, to stay 6 feet away. So those things were kind of drilled into us. Wear a mask, and the campaign I thought was really effective in just reinforcing the information. And whenever new information became available, the campaigns were updated and the information was relayed to our listeners in what I think was a very timely manner. So I think that the campaign itself was an absolute success. And I'm just really happy that we were able to provide that to our listeners, because a lot of the commercial stations did not spend as much time making sure that their listeners were informed about ways to protect themselves from COVID-19.
So one thing about your show, I mean, it's always like super vibrant, and I do love Latin Fridays, and all of the
Mhm,
other spice that you add to your show. And one thing that happens on your show is like you get direct calls from people in the
mhm.
audience,
I
which
do.
I think is so thoughtful and so caring.
Mhm,
What are some of the conversations that you've had with your listeners in real time
mhm.
about COVID-19?
So when they call and they mention COVID-19, a lot of times it's people who are probably more alone than they've been before. So maybe single people, older, without a spouse, or maybe they just have a spouse and they were kind of cut off from the world. And so this was kind of just a way for them to kind of reach out to someone and talk to them, and just kind of commiserate about, like, oh, this really sucks. I hate this virus, and that kind of thing. So it was a really interesting kind of way to start interacting with people, because usually they call and they just tell me, oh, I love the music, or they say, well, who is that drummer or what. But with COVID-19, they started calling and just talking about themselves a little bit more, and just some of the things that they were dealing with as audience members. And mostly it was just feeling kind of alone and cut off from the world at large, that a lot of them had concerns about.
What about listener drop off? Do you know if your listener numbers were affected in any way by COVID?
As far as I know, they were not. If I had to guess, I would say I even picked up a few new regular listeners during COVID-19, just because people were in place and they had the time and the ability to kind of tune in and listen to the show a lot more than they had, previously, because life before COVID-19 was go, 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 go. I have to go. And now, people have the opportunity to work from home more. They're able to listen to what they want to hear on the radio at their homes, as opposed to being in an office where it might just be, some soundtrack that the office chose for them. So I think that I have not seen any discernible listener drop off. And if anything, I've picked up a few extras. So thank you guys for tuning in.
And you have been an amazing on-air announcer. You have worked with young people here at our station. Not only that, you've taken on interns. You've just been a really just wonderful asset to our station in so many ways. So I thank you so much for your time here today. And Lolethia DL Underdue is the general manager of the radio station, our student station, AudioNet. She is a lecturer in the Department of Mass Communication here at North Carolina Central University, on-air announcer extraordinaire, wears many hats. And I just appreciate all the time that you've taken with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me on, Kimberly. It's been a joy. And, and I just want to add to that, in addition to our listeners, enjoying my show, our recently, I don't want to say departed, because that makes it sound like he died, but Alan, recently left the station, but he was also like a complete beacon of light for a lot of our listeners. They really talked about how, motivating and just positive, and what great energy that he had while he was the host of our morning jazz show. And that meant a lot to them. So I just wanted to shout out Alan really quickly, because he definitely impacted a lot of people during COVID too.
Thank you for that. And Alan, he will be missed. And I thank you, audience, for watching via YouTube, for watching on Facebook and Instagram, as well as listening to WNCU 90.7 FM. We want you to like us. We want you to follow us. We want you to subscribe to our pages to see more of our archive shows. I'm Kimberly Pierce Cartwright. I'm your host for COVID Conversations. And we thank you so much for tuning in.